Protagonists on the world today. Nice to have your company. It's a Friday. In the US, it's a Thursday. And in the UK, it's the morning. So they've got a big day coming up. And the EU, the same thing, probably mid-morning at the moment. In 2025, the Trump administration imposed sanctions on the ICC Chief Prosecutor and judges, the UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, as well as 3 leading Palestinian human rights organisations, PCHR, Al-Haq and Mezan. That's and we see that Donald Trump is certainly ramping this up. A new report criminalising accountability. The US lawfare against the international justice system was published very recently by the Coalition for the ICC. Now, this report shows how measures are being used in ways that undermine international justice efforts at the International Criminal Court and also by civil society actors. The report calls on states and international institutions to urgently act on their responsibility to resist such attacks and protect those affected. Crimes must never go unpunished, especially those committed by these powerful states. We're going to discuss the actions of the US and the EU today with our panel and the terrible impact on those sanctions. The lengths democratic nations will go in suppressing a growing number of dissidents is chilling, as is the fact they face so little blowback. They have no accountability. Journalists and citizens everywhere should not consider they can escape this dragnet. Our panel today is Nilsson, legal historian and geopolitical analyst, Basil Valentine, political analyst and broadcaster, and Professor Emeritus Oliver Boyd-Barrett, Bowling Green University, Ohio, and California State University. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Matt, can you give us your views at the moment on where we are at with this situation?
It's where we're at. It's a very fleeting situation. The point on the legal framework that was used to impose these sanctions, they are very stable. The situation for the people who are submitted to these sanctions are, however, very, very volatile, and it's just one of these executive orders where power is taken outside all statutes, outside the cover of UN policy mandate, and it's just a situation where the conventions and the privileges and the immunities granted by the United Nations is attacked by one of the member countries in the Security Council. So the problem right now where we're at today is that there is no real pushback. What I am lacking, I know the legal situation, I know what has been done, I've seen what the consequences are, but right now, today, I am lacking other member states in the Security Council stepping up and saying, United States, what you have done is wrong. However, our country will grant these people who have been put under sanctions due to the executive orders, we will grant them a bank card. We will grant them economic security. We will grant them a job, or whatever it may be. We will grant them their donations. This, however, has not been seen. So that's where I would like it to go today. From a very static, locked situation where America actually has proven it can hurt someone, it should go to a situation where the other countries of the Security Council should tell America to back off, because we will step in and help these people who have been put under these restrictions.
Basil, tell me, are these sanctions illegal? I know they're immoral, but are they illegal?
Well, Matt says they're legal. He's a lawyer. And the employer of the
No,
Swedish government.
I said they were illegal.
Ah, okay. Apologies, I misheard.
Sorry, no, the sanctions are definitely illegal, and that's the problem. They're definitely illegal, but the other nations of the Security Council are not stepping up and pushing back on these illegal sanctions by granting the sanctioned individuals and organizations economic assistance. This is what I'm lacking. So sorry if anyone misunderstood me. The executive order made by the president is definitely illegal in an international law situation.
So, Basil,
Well,
then, because we now know they're illegal, they're immoral, what can we do about it?
well, like Matt says, what's the rest of the world doing to push back against the increasingly autocratic United States? The ginger Caligula, as he's sometimes referred to, Donald Trump, such a huge disappointment to so many people who genuinely bought into his pre-election rhetoric about not wanting to start any new wars and looking after the United States domestically. He's gone in completely the opposite direction, which is why some of his biggest champions, like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene, have completely disowned him. But on the international law front, it's just another example of the complete disintegration of international law and indeed of things like the Geneva Conventions since October the 7th, 2023 in particular. I mean, let's not forget that the ICJ ruled 18 months ago that the entire occupation of the West Bank, it reaffirmed its opinion that the occupation of the West Bank is illegal. But Israeli ministers are now going around saying that they have the United States' full support for settlement expansions, illegal settlement expansions, of course, which even Donald Trump in his first term meekly said to Netanyahu on one of his umpteen visits to Washington, where he takes all his literal dirty laundry. I'm not speaking metaphorically. Netanyahu turns up at the White House with suitcases full of soiled garments. But Trump mildly rebuked Netanyahu in his first term and asked him to cool it on the settlements. But not anymore. We don't know whether that's to do with the Epstein files or just plain bribery, ignorance, or whatever. So international law is completely disregarded. We had another flagrant example of it just yesterday with the interception in international waters of the global Samud flotilla. Dr. Frank Romano, who is a friend and regular contributor to this channel, is on his way to an Israeli dungeon right now. He might be there already. I spoke to him only on Wednesday, and he was due to appear on another program with me today, but he can't because he's in a dungeon. The flotilla was intercepted in international waters 600 miles from Palestine, south of Crete. Well, that's piracy. That's terrorism in anybody's language. But what's the response from the international community? Where is the widespread condemnation? Where are the sanctions? Nowhere to be seen. Instead, the people pursuing international law, like Karim Khan and Francesca Albanese, are the ones who are sanctioned. It's indicative of the moral turpitude that this world is in at the moment, where all sense of morality, justice and normality has been completely upended.
It's a disgraceful situation, and Oliver, your president, along with Bibi, are flouting that they are committing criminal acts, yet the world just sits by and watches them do that. Does Donald Trump have his own blacklist of indiscretions by various politicians around the world? Because how the hell is he getting away with this?
Well, that of course is the $1 trillion question, I suppose. Some people, with justification, I think, suspect that Israel has something on him. There is something on him with respect to Epstein and underage girls and even who knows? We don't know. I mean, we can speculate all we want, but I fully endorse, of course, what Matt and what Basil are saying about moral turpitude, about the collapse of law. What good is law unless there's somebody who is courageous enough and brave enough to stand up and insist that existing law be applied. But here we are, the countries that we used to think of as the civilizational standard bearers of law and international law, they are the ones now who engage in unprovoked attacks on sovereign countries and invasions and the killings of hundreds of innocent well, we don't know that they're innocent. I think probably they are innocent fishermen in small boats. Even if they're not innocent, there's nothing in law that justifies the murder of such people without due process. So we can go on and on about this. So this is now the world that we live in. And with respect to the particular case of Francesca Albanese, this is yet one more instance of attempts to criminalize free speech, to criminalize protest, but very selectively criminalizing protest against some of the worst injustices that we have seen in many decades. And I think, if you'll forgive me, and it won't take very long, but I did, before the program started, I just checked out. I wanted to remind myself of some of the work that Francesca Albanese has done over the past. I think she was appointed in 2022. And so just to read the titles is to, I think, to capture the vigor, the bravery, the determination of Francesca Albanese. Let me read these titles. The most recent, March 2026, her most recent report to the UNHRC, Torture and Genocide. In 2025, Gaza Genocide, a collective crime. In June 2025, from economy of occupation to economy of genocide. And then in 2024, anatomy of a genocide. So no wonder that the Israeli lobby don't like her. That's no surprise. No wonder that the American political system.
We've just lost Oliver. He's become frozen. He'll come back in a second. Usually if we count down 3, 2, you can hear him coming back to life again. Oliver, the defibrillator worked well. Keep going.
Those were the 4 titles that caught my attention. And what are these reports in general? What are they arguing? What are the main points that they are making? Well, that the acts of Israel in Gaza constitute genocide. It's very important to have an authoritative, respected voice who has many times visited Palestine, visited Gaza, whose works capture the voices of Palestinians and their everyday lives, to make the point. This is genocide, what we have witnessed. And she calls for accountability, and she accuses many of the world's largest and most powerful corporations of complicity in this genocide because they have profited from it. And she calls on countries that retain some sense of morality. She calls on those countries, we've just seen this happen with Spain, haven't we, to cut diplomatic and similar ties to Israel. I think this is in a desperate, unhappy miserable world, this is a courageous voice that we should respect and listen to and understand.
Yeah, I totally agree. Matt, tell me this: the private companies such as banks and etc., who are facilitating these sanctions, can they be sued, or can campaigns run against to raise attention of their complicity?
Well, yes, they in theory can be sued. However, it's not, as of now, anyone going after these huge institutions. There is the latest, when I looked into it, there was a federal judge in Maine who had a ruling in favor of two activists who feared criminal penalty for interacting with the ICC's sanctioned prosecutor, and then did so by citing First Amendment violations. But so far, there has no one been suing for the right to make payments to these individuals. And you have to remember, the sanctions that threaten these third-party providers, they can suffer criminal penalties of up to, I think it's 10 or 15 years in prison, and fines up to $1 million. So it's a very powerful effect that extends far beyond these named individuals. And you also have to remember that from a legal standpoint, these sanctions were imposed not after a judicial process, but after, how should I put it, by just an executive decree. So there was no opportunity for the targeted individuals to challenge the evidence or present their case, which is a basic function since the Magna Carta. I mean, it violates the fundamental due process standards of any civilized nations. So, I mean, the UN, the EU, the Assembly of States of the Rome Statutes, they have all condemned the measures as political motivated. Yes, that is true. But as I said previously, and I will repeat myself, they have not done anything to push back against the United States' illegal executive order, which surprises me.
Yeah, I find the whole thing abhorrent, and I think we're all on the same page here. Basil, whether it's with Francesca or anybody, the sanctions, they're very much like an attack by a terrorist organisation, which the US can be described as being that, and Israel most definitely. But it's true though, the attack on these people's individual freedoms and rights, and Matt made reference to it before, that perhaps Sweden should do something. What do they do, Basil? Maybe I'm going to the wrong person here, but what do they do? How do they get back their life? Because Donald Trump, I mean, by the way, I was quite supportive of Donald Trump on the run-up to his election, and I'm not too sure if he's been drinking the same stuff that Joe Biden has, or there's the manifesto held by Israel on certain activities as having some sort of impact. But he's gone from being just an average, or a sort of average president, to a complete, satanic effigy. And that's just being, and I'm not being stupid here. I'll calm down. What can they do? We know that Francesca's family is suing Trump and the administration, but really, what can they do? If Trump wants to destroy you, or the US wants to destroy you, and if you say boo against Israel, then you're stuffed, aren't you?
Yes, and you said terrorists, not only terrorists, Mike, they're gangsters as well, because Karim Khan said he's been threatened personally, his family have been threatened with violence. This is the language of gangsters who threaten legal officials. Only gangsters threaten judges and jurists of one sort or another. So it's a very, very dark place we're in. What recourse anybody has, I'm not so sure. The best hope is to wait for a more humane, intelligent person to become president of the United States. We've got 2.5 years to wait for that now. Some people say Trump himself is seriously ill. He might not see out his term. Whether or not J.D. Vance would be any better, I've no idea. Whether anybody taking over the office of the presidency in 2 years' time would be any better, we don't know. Because only candidates with certain attitudes are allowed to become president of the United States. But Trump is far and away the most egregious example. He's completely abandoned all morality. And interestingly enough, people like Tucker Carlson are now pointing this out, that anything purporting to Christian values has been completely abandoned, upended by the US-Israeli alliance. There's no compassion, there's no forgiveness, no mercy. And I also saw it pointed out on another channel earlier, a very interesting biblical reference. Now, we know that the Zionists, of course, issue the New Testament with its message of turning the other cheek, and instead adhere to an Old Testament eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth mentality. But that edict is designed to limit vengeance and retaliation. So, in other words, quite literally, if your enemy takes out your eye, you are entitled to take out one of his eyes. But the interpretation of it by the United States and Israel is, if you so much as prick our finger, we will kill you and all your family and everybody you've ever spoken to, and your children and your children's friends. Will kill everyone. So it isn't even, Old Testament morality that's being adhered to. It's a new form. You use the term satanic, Mike. I don't think it's out of place at all, because it seeks to maximize pain and destruction, as we've seen in southern Lebanon. Christian villages being detonated, completely erased. There's no conceivable military, let alone legal or moral justification. And yet, as Matt's pointed out, it's just crickets from the international community, because Israel has worked out after the Gaza genocide that it can do what it likes to whoever it likes, anywhere in the world, at any time, and there'll be no comeback at all. And if there is, well, we intimidate the Dutch judges, we threaten the Dutch judges, we sanction the judges and jurists. So, it's a very dark place, as Oliver said.
As a man who loves royalty, I don't know if you do, I'm just saying that because you're English. But I'm just thinking, though, this is, and I've always said that Donald Trump on the international stage is just out of his league. And I was watching the introduction of King Charles and I think it's Queen Camilla. I still have trouble with that, by the way, but Queen Camilla, they were shaking the hands of the cabinet in Washington. And as they're walking along and she's putting out her hand and Charles is there, Trump just barges in, almost pushes her over and shakes her hands and then says, "Come on, let's go." And I thought, from an English point of view, that's a lot of ignorance and a lot of disrespect for what is a royal visit.
Yeah, yes, I mean, usually these things are very carefully choreographed and coordinated.
Like a football match.
That's right. But Donald Trump is essentially, if I may say so, a rather common and coarse individual. In fact, extremely vulgar. We have a vulgarian president of the United States. That's becoming increasingly obvious. And we shouldn't really be surprised by this sort of behavior from him at all.
Oliver, you're...
I was going to say, I beg your pardon, just following up on the reference to Satan, cinematic representations of Satan actually, I always think, do quite a good job with him. He's frequently represented as someone who's actually very eloquent and very knowledgeable. Satan knows a lot, and his psychology is really acute and sharp and smart. So I think if you'll forgive me, Mike, I think to accuse Donald Trump of being satanic is really showing insufficient respect for Satan. Sorry about that. I have to say. And this recent meeting with King Charles III, actually, I think there's an important point we should make here. Much as we dislike Trump, the fact is, he's allowed to continue. I think if Trump was not acting in a way that did not meet with the approval of what we can loosely refer to as the deep state of the United States, we would indeed have seen some competent assassination, not attempt, but a competent assassination would have been conducted by now. So that I want to make that point, that although he may be absolutely crazy, he may be suffering from acute and advanced dementia, he may simply be one of the most evil people who have walked this earth, but he does not walk alone. While many people will say, well, yeah, that's because he walks ahead of Netanyahu and serves at Israeli pleasure. I myself don't think that, although I do think Israel's hold over the United States political system is bizarre and weird, but I don't think it's absolute. And I think it is only there because, for the moment, Israel and what Israel does and what Israel wants is aligned with US goals for global hegemony. And that brings me to this point, that the way in which Trump and the Trump administration behaves, it does behave as though it has no expectation of real accountability ever. And that is because it understands, first of all, that it can behave in the way that it does because the United States is still the world's single most powerful country. And it behaves in the way that it does because its objective, its most important foreign policy objective, is to sustain, or if you prefer, to recover the unipolar moment. It doesn't expect to be held accountable because it expects always to be in control. In this ambition, it has regrettably, in my view, it has the not total but largely unbrokered support of Europe, on this occasion represented by King Charles III. And that, I think, brings us back to Francesca Albanese, because it's not only the United States that is criminalizing free speech and justified protest against abuse and international crime, but the Europeans are doing a great job at this themselves. And of course, I believe there are 60 individuals right now whom the European Commission has sanctioned, people like Jacques Baud, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, who's a Swiss national, who's accused of making conspiracy. By the way, he's a very fine commentator, very, very fine and smart analyst, but he's being accused of conspiracy theories with respect to Europeans' engagement with Ukraine in the war with Russia. So there are 60 people in this situation where they can't they don't have access to their bank accounts. They're allowed only a very small amount per week, and then some banks don't even allow them access for those paltry amounts that they're supposed to live on themselves and also to pay for their family expenses, their mortgages, and so on. Their lives without any due process. This is what's important here. There is no due process. There's no one that you can go to appeal these gross, grotesque, medieval-like travesties of justice. So Europe is playing this game just as the United States is playing this game. They don't expect ever these people to be held accountable for the evil that they do. They are mistaken, because actually I do believe they will be held to account. They're not nearly smart or intelligent enough to dig themselves out of the messes that they have created over the past 10 to 20 years. I'll stop there.
No, it's fine. I'm just thinking, Matt's, did it surprise you when J.D. Vance came out and said about Donald Trump, sort of getting off topic here, but it's sort of tied in anyway. He said that he fears that the Pentagon has been misleading him. Perhaps, and that would be a shock that they would ever do that. And then you see that Donald Trump now wants to have his big, fat, ugly head on. I'm a bit anti-Donald today because I don't like what he's doing to the world. But his face is going to be on the American passports. Have you heard any rumours in Sweden, Matt, that he's approaching Ronald McDonald to replace Ronald with Donald?
No, I haven't. But I do miss the old Ronald McDonald clown. It would have been such a fitting portrayal of the world and the McDonald geopolitics that we're stuck in today. And going back to the situation of the deep state and what the deep state has always been looking for, I would just like to quickly tie it back to the longer term impacts that this Albanese and Boyd situation in both America and the European Union does, because it has, in my view, a very chilling effect on the accountability mechanisms themselves. I mean, these sanctions, if you look at them, if you take them down with my legal eyes, as I sometimes do, they are designed not to deter only the named individuals, but the entire international justice community. Organizations that cooperate with the ICC, that document war crimes, organizations that provide evidence to UN inquiries, now suddenly, and with some right, fear secondary sanctions. So persons who even interact with the ICC official or a UN rapporteur risk criminal prosecution. So thereby it's effectively criminalizing what we would call routine engagement with international legal institutions. So that means that victims of these atrocious Western crimes may be deprived their last resort for justice. And these sanctioned judges and prosecutors, as I said, they've reported being totally frozen. Their essential IT systems have been taken away from them. And the total effect, the cumulative effect of this is actually been described as bringing the international legal system, the day-to-day grinding, to a standstill. So by attacking this one permanent international criminal court and the rapporteurs who bring the evidence, the UN signals that powerful states can act with total impunity, and it totally obliterates the post-World War II architecture of international law. And it sets a precedent to other states that they can do the same. Now, this is what I mean, the damage to the ICC's long-term legitimacy. This is where it saddens me so much that, of course, I can't expect France and Great Britain to do anything, but the other two members of the Security Council, China and Russia, I would so have liked to see a greater pushback in defense of the international legal order as we once knew it. And I can't for the life of me understand why these countries are so quiet on the situation of the ICC and of Francesca, for that matter.
Basil, can you, is it just me, or has this been a slow creep, the distortion of humanity, especially if you look at the last few months with Trump, or has it been a tsunami of effect? I can't really work out. We've always talked about that we're going to head down this way, but it seems like we've fallen over the edge of a cliff and dropped pretty quickly. Is it just me, or do you agree with me, or do you think maybe I'm just imagining that it's been slow, and then rapid?
Yeah, like the old dance, slow, quick, slow, you know. But yeah, certainly there's been an accelerated decline in international diplomacy in the last few years. Even before October the 7th, with the Russian incursion into Ukraine, it seemed at that point the usual niceties of diplomacy were abandoned, not just by the special military operation, but the language that politicians then started to use around it, where any form of contact with the other side is dismissed as appeasement. We have endless, totally irrelevant, erroneous comparisons to the 1930s and World War II. Everybody is Hitler, remember. Saddam Hussein was Hitler, Gaddafi was Hitler, Khamenei is Hitler, Putin is Hitler. It's all absolutely ridiculous. So international law has unfortunately been eroded, largely by the Middle East situation. There's been no concerted attempt even before October the 7th to hold Israel accountable for the myriad injustices against the Palestinians. But then after October the 7th, well, that's when we've seen everything completely collapse. That's when we've seen the fruits of 60, 70 years of Israel lobby penetration of the deep state in the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union come to fruition, because they've had their people in place. They've had the media sufficiently supine. There are two books coming out just this week, actually, one by Asal Rad, the other one, I think it's Jonathan Wilkinson, something like that, about how the media created the environment for genocide to take place. Not this channel, I'm pleased to say, but other channels and media did so. So it's not just the disintegration of the international legal framework, but also whether compromised, whether, as I put it, bribed, blackmailed, or bullied politicians across Europe and the United States also failed to stand up for international law, and the so-called fourth estate, the media, has failed to stand up for international law. So that's a sort of unholy triangle, really, that's led to the abysmal situation that we're in now.
Yep. Oliver, the EU accused Jacques Boyd as acting as a mouthpiece for pro-Russian propaganda and spreading conspiracy theories, which they're not conspiracy theories, they're pretty well bang on, including that Ukraine orchestrated its own invasion. We had a gentleman that used to work here with us. He was invited to run the information operation against, I won't say his name because he's trying to stay alive, but he disagreed enormously with the information operation and wanted no part of it, and almost lost his life. Now, the sanctions, though, because this is what the EU is saying, that Jacques Boyd, bad boy, he's information manipulation, blah, 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 that sort of stuff. It's a pretty handy way, isn't it, Oliver, to shut people down, because you shut a few people down, and Basil can reflect to one of our dear friends who we refer to as 007. If you shut down a few of these, the fear of God becomes, or the fear of the US or the EU or whatever country doesn't want you to say anything, it becomes very, very tangible, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes. And Mike, I liked how you began the conversation with Basil just now. The slow, rapid path of development of this. And I think of particular importance was 2003, the invasion of Iraq, which is the last time I had the sense that the authorities were trying to be quite serious and quite professional about the propaganda and the pre-war shenanigans that are generally played to convince everybody that the war is necessary and so on. But they failed, and they failed miserably, even before the invasion. There were knowledgeable expert voices that were expressing great skepticism about WMD and so forth. And of course, once the invasion had started, even during the invasion, we had a number of instances which simply exposed the poverty of the propaganda. Propaganda just wasn't working anymore. And once a large number of people have seen that on this scale, that it is propaganda, that we are being lied to about everything and all of the time, then you can't really unsee that. And I think what this slow, rapid trajectory that you're referring to, I think mirrors this acceptance by authority that the propaganda games aren't that important anymore, because no one really believes it anyway. The only way that we can do what we need to do is through coercive measures. And coercive measures include these kind of extremely punitive actions that are being taken against people like Jacques Boyd, and of course, and we haven't yet mentioned, because it is very relevant in this context, the whole saga about Palestine action in the United Kingdom, where a year ago this was judged to be a terrorist organization, but then just a few months ago, the Supreme Court decided, well, no, it's not really terrorist. We can't really call it terrorist. And now that judgment is being appealed by the government. But while it is being appealed, Palestine Action is still, for the purposes of law, considered to be a terrorist organization. What are they doing? All they're basically doing is saying, stop the genocide, for God's sake. This is the most dreadful crime that the world has had to witness, well, really since World War II, I guess. And stop it. We have to stop it. We have to do everything in our power to stop this crime. But now, to go out onto the street and to voice that sentiment, it's criminal. You are now the criminal, not the people who are committing genocide.
Matt, can you just tell me, because we have now a new president, which Taylor Hudak, I was watching one of her videos the other day. She does not like him. And she look at it, it's like, whoa, Taylor, have another coffee. But she speaks very, very badly of the new president. What it does, though, for the EU, less resistance, and the walls of the separation between mainly right and wrong is just being eroded. And we talked to Oliver and Basil about the increasing pace of change, and you can see what's happening with the EU, for example, and then they can shut people down, throw in sanctions, destroy their lives. US is following that, along with Israel and other countries, and even Australia, where Australia is trying to catch up. We're always a bit behind, but we do eventually catch up and create new atrocities. And then look at the Frank Romano, who's a very dear friend of ours. Where do you think we're going to head to? We're at the pointy end of the plane at the moment. What's in the cockpit? How are we going to look? Because EU, if you're a citizen, you have got no rights. They can do whatever they like. They shut you down. They can sanction you. They can do all sorts of things. Throw you in jail. We'll discuss your crimes in about 10 years' time. Do whatever they want. And you have less and less governments who are opposing the general direction of the EU and von der Leyen and all her cronies. Where is it going to end up? Because I believe that we're ending up at the pointy end of the plane. All these things happening around the world, UK, US, Middle East, Australia, all throughout the entire world, the EU, it's leading to a particular point, and none of it's coincidence, because there's no such thing as a coincidence, I don't believe. Where do you think we're going to end up? Because in my humble opinion, I think we're stuffed.
Well, being the historian that I so much am, I'm not surprised, because looking back at, we're saying that this happens now, but I think this happens now because no one pushed back before. You have to remember this terrorist label. Nelson Mandela, I mean, he was on the US terrorist watch list until 2008, I think, and that was 18 years after he was released, and it was like 14 or 15 or 16 years after he received the Nobel Peace Prize. So, I mean, this case illustrates how a terrorist label can be used to legitimize and isolate basically any political movement, as long as even if it has received mainstream international recognition, because none of the other nations that were so-called supporters of international law dared to push back against the United States. And we had the same situation with the Brazilian Supreme Court justice in 2025. The US sanctioned a sitting Supreme Court justice in Brazil. I forgot his name now, but then they cited the Global Magnitsky Act, which is another one of these very flimsy legal constructs in order to quiet down dissent. And you had other examples, and the EU terrorist listings, and you had a blacklisting of certain individuals. And one of my favorite is the use of the specially designated global terrorist blacklist of foreign politicians. United States have repeatedly used this and accused supporters of Hezbollah, Lebanese political ministers, and a leader of the Free Patriotic Movement as well. So, I mean, these individuals were just dissidents in relation to American policy, but America was still allowed to designate them terrorists and quiet them. So what I mean is that these dissidents and intellectuals and artists and politicians that have been quieted and no one has said anything to protest this, means that we're here today because of everyone allowing this universal American judicial push sanctions to be allowed. I'm not surprised, And I think it's too late to turn the plane around now. But what we learn from this is that unless good people do something, we are always going to end up in a very, very bad place.
We are indeed. Basil, we are watching the clock for you, mate. Haven't forgotten that you have to be out onto the train off somewhere important. 60 seconds. Where do you think we're heading? You heard my theory. Where do you think we're heading? Do you think we're all converging at the pointy end and something horrible is waiting around the corner? I do. What do you think?
No, I'm an optimist, Mike, as I think you know. I like to believe that there is actually a global awakening underway to the obviously the horrors going on in the world at the moment, but also a power structure that doesn't serve people. We're very much aware of this here in the United Kingdom. It looks like the Labour Party in next week's local elections will poll around 12 to 15%, which for a party of government is likely to be the lowest ever. The Conservative Party has all but disintegrated. The Greens are surging, and so is Nigel Farage's Reform Party. For various reasons, people are aware of the fact that the structures and the political class that's supposed to look after them are no good, that they don't work. There's increasing awareness of that in the United States as well, although the distorting effect of money on American democracy means that any change there is even slower. And since Citizens United, the billionaire class run Congress, and they pick the president, and it's going to take something monumental to change that. But in the rest of the world, people are banding together, shall we say, and worked out the fact that there's something wrong with the picture. You know, you used to have to be a hardcore conspiracy nut to say, look, you know, everything might look as if it's all right, but in fact, it's all we're going to hell in a handcart. Well, now most people can see that we're going to hell in a handcart, and they want someone to do something about it. So I believe in the human spirit, and I like to think that we will turn this around, but not without major upheaval. Not without a reassertion, primarily, of some fundamental principles of universal human rights to start with, because that's been abandoned. So we need to get back to very basic things that we can all agree on, and then go from there.
Oliver, you have 2 minutes. Do you agree with me that it's not the light at the end of the tunnel? It's this bloody monstrosity of a big train coming towards us very quickly.
I do think we are living in very, very dangerous times. If we're going to look for points of optimism, and why shouldn't we? One of those points lies in this odious mixture of stupidity, hubris, and selfishness and greed of our elites, and the very, very poor decisions that this odious mixture brings about, of which, of course, one of them is this latest unprovoked attack by the United States and Israel on Iran and the current energy crisis. We can't be sure, of course. I'm not going to pretend that I know how this is going to work itself out, but I do think that very serious errors of judgment have been manifest, and both in the United States and also, although Europe has in recent weeks decided to stand at a distance from the United States on Iran. Let us not forget that Europe is at least as culpable as the United States and Israel, for that matter, for the generation of the Iran is a nuclear threat myth that Netanyahu invented a couple of decades ago. But we are still, I think, it's a rocky road for sure, but we are still on the road towards a multipolar order. We do have in Russia and China, I believe, some incredibly good leaders who has some very, very wise things to say about the global order. However, and Matt's raised this issue, why don't we see Russia and China help to push back against these actions that are being taken against people like Francesca Albanese? Why don't we hear more from them? Well, of course, the problem is, although I don't want to fall into the trap of just discarding these extraordinarily long-lived, important and rich civilizations. I don't want to smear them with cheap labels such as authoritarian or autocratic. But nonetheless, of course, they have their own skeletons to deal with. And we can't look to them to solve our domestic problems of free speech. That's what we have to do.
We do. We have to wrap it up there. Sorry, Oliver. Just quickly, Oliver, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
I have a Substack column. It's called Empire and Communication. You'll find me there.
Fantastic. Mats Nilsson, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Oh, they can find me on X at Massey Nilsson with 2 Zs.
And Basil Valentine, who we're very aware of the time, how do they find out more about you, Baz?
I'll be on UK Column News in exactly 4 hours from now.
That'll be an interesting afternoon event you're going to. Good luck. Thank you so much for your time. I've had a ball. This has been The Protagonist. We'll catch you again on Monday and The World Today. Have a great weekend. Be careful, be kind to your neighbours, and most of all, be kind to yourself.